Voorhees man is found guilty of killing his wife. Shawn Lichtfuss choked Stefanie Caraway 4 years ago. The trial in Camden County lasted 6 days. The jury needed just 45 minutes. His sentencing date has not yet been scheduled.
No one ever thinks the man standing in the kitchen will become a headline. On the outside, Shawn Lichtfuss looked like an ordinary American husband in his early 50s, 53 years old, a quiet man, not flashy, not loud, the kind of person neighbors barely noticed because nothing about him demanded attention. He lived in Voorhees, New Jersey, in a modest home where mornings usually began the same way: coffee brewing, the low hum of the television, the faint routine of married life. His wife, Stefanie Caraway, was 46. Friends described her as warm, practical, deeply loyal. She carried the emotional weight of the household without complaint. The kind of woman who remembered birthdays, scheduled appointments, smoothed over tension before it exploded. To outsiders, their marriage looked tired but intact, strained but surviving. What people didn't see were the silences. The long pauses between conversations, the way arguments ended without resolution, the way Stefanie increasingly slept with her back turned, the way Shawn began retreating inward, folding himself into a quiet resentment he never learned how to name. He was not a man who asked for help. He carried pressure like a private burden, financial stress, emotional insecurity, fear of being left behind. Those closest to him would later say he seemed distant in the months before August 2021, less patient, more withdrawn, as if something inside him was cracking, slowly, invisibly. No one thought it would end in violence. No one thought it would end with death. If stories like this matter, if truth, justice, and remembrance matter, then take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Because these stories only survive when people choose not to look away. August 3, 2021 did not begin with screaming. It began quietly. Sometime that morning, friends of Shawn Lichtfuss received text messages that didn't feel right. The tone was off, final, heavy with implication. Messages that suggested something terrible had already happened or was about to. Concern turned into panic. A welfare check was requested. Police arrived at the Lichtfuss home expecting tension, maybe a domestic argument, maybe a misunderstanding. What they found instead was silence, the kind that makes your chest tighten before you even open the door. Inside the house, Stefanie Caraway lay dead, strangled. The room showed signs of a struggle, disarray that told a story without words. Violence had occurred here, not accidental, not distant, personal, intimate. The kind of killing that requires proximity, force, and time. Stefanie had not walked out. She had not collapsed unexpectedly. She had been killed by someone who stood close enough to look into her face. Shawn was gone. Hours later, police found him sitting in his vehicle near a police station, not running, not hiding, just waiting. When officers approached, he did not resist. He said very little at first, but the truth was already unfolding through texts, timelines, and the brutal stillness of the house they had shared. By the end of the day, Stefanie Caraway was gone forever, and the man who had once called her his wife was in custody for her murder. When investigators pieced together the hours after Stefanie's death, one detail stood out: the messages. Text messages Shawn sent to friends after the killing, words typed with shaking hands, heavy with shock and regret. In one message, he wrote that he had just snapped. In another, he asked people to look after his son, to take care of the pets. There was no denial, no elaborate excuse, just an admission wrapped in panic. At the police station, Shawn's posture told a story his mouth barely could. Slumped shoulders, eyes fixed downward, a man who knew there was no undoing what had already happened. When questioned, he did not claim innocence. He did not fabricate a stranger or an accident. The truth emerged in fragments, arguments that escalated, emotions that spiraled, control that vanished. This was not a crime of planning. It was a crime of collapse. But collapse does not erase responsibility. Stefanie had fought for her life. The medical evidence would later confirm it. She had resisted. She had tried to survive. And Shawn had not stopped. That fact would follow him into every courtroom, every sleepless night, every locked cell. The trial began in 2025. By then, the case had aged, but the grief had not. Stefanie's family sat in the courtroom carrying years of unanswered pain. Shawn sat at the defense table thinner than before, his face marked by time and confinement. Prosecutors laid out the evidence methodically: the texts, the medical examiner's findings, the timeline, the absence of any credible alternative explanation. They described strangulation not as an instant act, but a prolonged one, seconds that feel like minutes, minutes that demand conscious continuation. The defense spoke of emotional distress, of pressure, of a man unraveling. But unraveling did not change the outcome. After 6 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than an hour, 45 minutes. That was all it took to reach a verdict of first-degree murder. When the word guilty was spoken, Stefanie's family wept, not in triumph, but in exhaustion. Justice does not heal wounds. It only names the truth. Shawn did not react dramatically. No outburst, no collapse. Just a long, hollow stillness. He was led away in handcuffs, now officially a convicted murderer. Sentencing loomed, but it would never come. Outside the courtroom, lives continued, but permanently altered. Stefanie's loved ones struggled with grief layered upon grief. Not only had they lost her, but the man responsible would never fully explain why. There would be no apology powerful enough, no sentence long enough. Shawn's family faced a different kind of devastation: the shame, the disbelief, the painful reconciliation of memories with facts they could no longer deny. How do you mourn someone who committed an unforgivable act? How do you grieve without excusing? Some relationships fractured under the weight. Others grew quieter, more fragile. The community whispered. Media headlines reduced years of life into paragraphs of horror. And in jail, Shawn waited. Alone. Conviction changes the air around a person. In custody, Shawn no longer lived in limbo. The future was now defined: life in prison, no return, no redemption arc in the legal sense. In his cell, nights stretched endlessly. The echoes of doors, the distant voices, the weight of memory pressing down without mercy. He replayed moments again and again. The argument, Stefanie's voice, her resistance, the moment he crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Regret does not arrive gently. It arrives like a flood. And some people cannot survive it. On the night of September 19, 2025, just 1 day after his conviction, correctional officers found Shawn Lichtfuss unresponsive in his cell. Emergency measures failed. He was pronounced dead. The ruling: suicide by asphyxiation. The news landed like a second impact. For Stefanie's family, there was no relief, only the bitter reality that he chose an ending that denied them final accountability. No sentencing, no final statement, no closure wrapped in formality. Just silence.